Y&R Spoilers reveal that Lauron, escape and revenge. In a dramatic development in Genoa City, Lauron, one of the most dangerous enemies anyone can imagine, escaped from prison with a cunning plan. His story, with seemingly unbelievable events, began with a fall from a balcony last year, when Martin successfully assumed the identity of Lauron. Supposedly his deceased brother, Martin tricked and made everyone believe that he was Alan, and for a long time, no one suspected him. However, Martin's recent escape was more than just a simple escape, it was a calculated move by a man with experience and hatred. Surprise and fear from the community as news of Martin's escape spread, the whole city of Genoa City began to shake. The townspeople were confused, wondering what Martin would do next. Would he continue to live in the shadows, or would he unleash a vengeance so brutal that no one could imagine? The police quickly began to track him down, but Martin, with his ingenuity and planning, made the search more difficult than ever. Not only did he escape, but he also posed a real threat to those who had ever stood in his way. Martin's motives, what is the real reason? Looking at the matter from Martin's perspective, things became clearer. He was not simply a villain with a blind goal of revenge. Martin's every move had a specific purpose and plan. Martin had long felt that he was being compared to Alan, whom he considered his superior brother, and he wanted to prove that he could surpass Alan in every way. To do this, Martin had to build a solid cover, so that when people trusted Alan's image, he could approach and manipulate situations in a subtle way. Since the balcony incident last year, Martin has been successful in maintaining his secret. But things began to change when he made a big mistake, kidnapping Sharon and Phyllis. This was an act that no one could forgive, and it seemed to be the turning point in his plan. Kidnapping Sharon and Phyllis, experiment or revenge? Martin decided to kidnap Phyllis and Sharon as part of a bizarre experiment that he thought would prove his intelligence. However, his motives were not pure. Martin believed that he could help Phyllis and Sharon, and that we should thank him for bringing them help. In his mind, imprisoning these two women was a way to highlight his own humanity and courage. But in reality, this action was the exact opposite, it was a terrifying, sinister, and disturbing act. Martin could not accept that Phyllis and Sharon could overcome the ordeal without his help. He saw their imprisonment as a way to force them to realize that they owed him gratitude. This was a selfish and self-satisfied thought. But behind it, there was a jealous person, eager to assert himself and willing to do anything to prove that he was not inferior to anyone. Martin's depravity and consequences. Martin's imprisoning Phyllis and Sharon was not only a power play for him, but also an act of depravity that could not be justified. There was no reason that could convince him that forcing two women into such a trap was an acceptable action. Martin's motivations are built on selfish emotions, comparisons to his brother whom he has always considered a rival, and a distorted view of the women he believes owe him. As Phyllis and Sharon attempt to escape their captivity, we see a change in their views of Martin. Phyllis and Sharon will no longer see him as someone who can save or help. Instead, they will perceive Martin as a real threat, one who has no humanity but only cruelty and a desire to assert himself. The police and the new war. Martin's escape was not a simple event. It drew reactions from the police, from Lauron's family, and from the people of the city. Will Martin really achieve his goal of revenge against Phyllis and Sharon? Can he continue to live in the shadows, or will there be a dangerous chase, where everything will become more dramatic than ever? This chase is not only Martin's affair, but also the affair of everyone involved. What will Phyllis and Sharon do to deal with Martin? And will the police be able to quickly find his traces before he can carry out his next plans? Will Martin achieve his goal? In the end, it all comes down to one big question: will Martin be able to carry out his plan and exact revenge on Phyllis and Sharon? Or will the police pursuit end his dangerous adventure? Surely, Martin's actions will shock not only himself but everyone involved with him. A struggle for power, intellect, and pride as a man becomes the most dangerous man Genoa City has ever faced. Martin's revenge, if it comes to pass, will not only change the lives of Phyllis and Sharon, but also open a new chapter in the war between the dark forces in this city. Escape plot and bloody revenge. Martin Lauron is arguably the most reckless and ruthless character in the world of the young and the restless. With his arrogant and competitive nature, Martin constantly believes in his superior intelligence, while he believes that everyone around him is inferior to him. However, his oversized ego is the factor that leads to his own downfall. However, Martin's escape from prison may bring a new twist, with a dramatic revenge plot that no one expected. Reckless nature and risky plans. Martin has always been a gambler on risky plans, and he does not hesitate to trade his own life to do what he wants. Martin's motive is simple: he wants to prove that he is smarter and more talented than everyone else. Since posing as his deceased brother Alan, Martin has built a perfect cover, making everyone believe in Alan's true nature and career. However, this deception did not last forever, and it was Martin's mistakes in the process of carrying out his plans that created fatal loopholes. Martin's life as Alan could have continued smoothly if it were not for the intervention of Phyllis and Sharon. However, their forcing Martin to face the truth by pretending that his experiment had failed was the major turning point that led to Martin's downfall. It was Martin's ego that betrayed him, and this was the moment he fell into the trap that Sharon and Phyllis had set up. The experiment and the downfall of Martin. The experiment that Martin conducted on Sharon and Phyllis can be considered a selfish and cruel ploy. He not only saw it as an experiment to prove his superior intelligence, but also treated these women as pawns in his own grand game. However, trapping Phyllis and Sharon in an elaborate and cruel trap was not the action of someone who wanted to help them, but of a psychopath, someone who had no empathy for the pain of others. And then, when Sharon and Phyllis realized Martin's true motives, they did not let him escape the truth. By forcing Martin to confess his mistakes, Sharon and Phyllis defeated him, shattering the illusion of Alan that Martin had built all this time. Martin was exposed, and his fake career officially collapsed. Ego and the final breakdown. Martin's ego was his fatal weakness. If it weren't for Sharon and Phyllis's intervention, Martin would probably still be living under the guise of Alan, and he would probably still be engaged to Tracy Abbott, Beth Maitland, as part of his perfect plan. However, it was his carelessness and complacency that led to Martin being unable to maintain that falsehood. He believed that everything was under control, but it was Phyllis and Sharon who took control when they set up a perfect trap. Cornered, Martin now had no choice but to face defeat, and of course, revenge was the inevitable thing he had to do. Escape plan, a new plot? After being exposed and sent to prison, Martin may have promised himself that he would never let himself be defeated like that again. With his scheming and manipulative nature, Martin certainly couldn't stop thinking about how to escape. He has successfully deceived everyone and built a perfect cover of Alan, so why can't he escape from prison? Martin's escape is not just a hypothesis but a reality. With his meticulous planning and strategic thinking, Martin will not easily give up his goal of revenge. He will take advantage of every loophole in the prison's security system, which will not only make the people in the police department panic but also make the whole city of Genoa City live in fear of Martin's return. Bloody revenge. If Martin succeeds in escaping, he will not let those who exposed him, especially Sharon and Phyllis, rest in peace. Driven by his pride and desire to prove that he is superior to everyone, Martin will not stop at nothing to seek revenge. Will he continue to target Sharon and Phyllis? Or will he unleash a larger vengeance, targeting not only those who wronged him, but also a more dangerous game, with many others caught up in his plot? Either way, Martin's revenge will be more than a personal battle, with far-reaching implications for relationships across the city. Martin's escape may just be the beginning of a more dramatic chapter in his life. Once he's out, everything will change, and those who hurt him will no longer be able to escape the ruthlessness of a Martin who has nothing left to lose. The chase will not only be a confrontation between the police and the criminals, but also a battle between wisdom and strength, between those who never give up. With an ego too big and plans always built in the dark, Martin Lauron is sure to create an explosion that no one can predict. And Genoa City will have to prepare for the storms he is about to bring. Escape and unfinished revenge. Martin Lauron is one of the most haunting and scheming characters on The Young and the Restless, a man who lives in the shadows with unpredictable plots. After being exposed and sent to prison, Martin's life seems to have ended. However, there is one thing we have to admit. For Martin, death is not the end but only the beginning of other plans, a series of new power plays that he will create to shake Genoa City. And if Y&R plans to keep Martin alive instead of killing him in some dramatic battle, perhaps it is because they want to use him to cause chaos, to take things to an unforeseen turn. Throughout Martin's journey, we see that, even though he is in custody, he is still a potential threat, never completely eliminated. If the battle between him and characters like Phyllis and Sharon continues, it will inevitably lead to a clash, a bloody revenge whose outcome is unknown. Phyllis, after being manipulated and kidnapped by Martin, cannot feel the closure she longs for even though he is behind bars. The obsession with Martin continues to haunt her, and the big question is whether she will feel relieved if Martin dies? Or will Phyllis herself be the one to end Martin's cruel fate? Martin's escape, a new beginning. Martin Lauron has never been one to be easily defeated. Even when he is in custody, his stealth and cunning still lead to a spectacular escape. A daredevil like Martin would never accept living in prison without a plan for revenge. If he does indeed escape, it could be the beginning of a new conflict, and Genoa City could see unpredictable upheavals again. Much of the surprise about Martin comes not just from the actions he takes, but from his ability to create chaos when things seem to be calm. Martin's escape is not simply a prison break, but the beginning of a new war, one in which people like Phyllis and Sharon will be the main targets. When Martin escapes from prison, he wants not only to kill those who wronged him, but also to prove that he is still in control. And Phyllis, who is trapped in Martin's trap, will surely feel like she has never truly escaped his control. Can Phyllis find a way to deal with Martin once and for all, or will she continue to live in the shadow of an enemy who is relentlessly pursuing her? Phyllis, anxiety and revenge. Phyllis may think that her life will be resolved if Martin is killed. She thinks that Martin's death will help her find peace and closure from her painful past. But is Martin's death really the closure Phyllis desires? Looking into Phyllis's past, we see that she is someone who always sets her sights on strong decisions, but is also susceptible to emotional and power games. What Martin did to her were not small mistakes, but elaborate and cruel games that she cannot easily ignore. Phyllis was imprisoned and manipulated, and that continues to leave her with a lingering fear. Martin's survival, despite being in custody, leaves her with no peace of mind. The biggest question Phyllis faces is whether she can find a way to end this threat, not just by waiting for Martin to die, but by confronting and taking control of her own destiny. If Martin doesn't die, will Phyllis be able to do so, or will she fall into the cycle of revenge he has created? Sharon, anxiety and important decisions. While Phyllis is dealing with her obsession with Martin, Sharon can't escape the same feelings. Martin once kidnapped and manipulated her, forcing Sharon to face challenges and decisions she never imagined. But with Martin in custody, Sharon can't be sure she's truly free of his shadow. The feeling that Martin could return at any moment keeps Sharon from finding peace in her life. For Sharon, however, leaving Martin is not the only answer. She does not want to be haunted by revenge, but instead must find a way to overcome herself and find her own path in life. Will she decide to face Martin again, or will she let him face the consequences of his actions? Ultimately, whether Martin is killed or not, the threat he poses will not go away easily. Martin's actions, from impersonating Ellen to manipulating Phyllis and Sharon, have left deep scars in the minds of those he has harmed. Once Martin escapes from prison, life in Genoa City will no longer be peaceful. Phyllis and Sharon will face a difficult decision. Can they overcome their obsession with Martin and move on with their lives, or will they have to fight to the end to end a bloody chapter of their lives? A bloody and dramatic revenge awaits, and Genoa City will never be safe with Martin Lauron in the shadows.